It started like every other failed first contact attempt. They didn't come in peace, they came in pride. We were barely crawling beyond our solar system, still arguing about petty borders, oil, and money, while they hovered in silence just beyond Jupiter, watching, measuring, judging. They called themselves the Aurak Val. In their tongue, it meant born of strength. According to the scraps we pieced together later, they'd ruled over 7 star systems, crushed 13 other species into extinction, and hadn't faced a military defeat in over 6,000 years. To them, we were children. Weak, unrefined, still playing with bullets and bombs while they bent black holes like firewood. Their ships didn't land. They dropped warnings. The first one came in a flash of violet light over New Delhi. A heat surge melted half the satellites above Earth's orbit. Communications died in seconds. No demands, no voice, just raw power, a flex. And we understood. It wasn't a message for peace. It was a warning of hierarchy. Within a week, world leaders were either panicking or pretending it was a hoax. But when a second flash erased a naval fleet in the Pacific, without a single explosion or ripple in the water, the lie couldn't hold anymore. Then came Contact Day. They didn't step down like gods. No, they walked among us like farmers surveying a broken field. Tall, armored, silent. Muscles like coiled steel under black skin that shimmered with biotech implants. Their leader, if you could call it that, spoke through a translator embedded in its throat. "We are not here to conquer. We are here to correct." The words sent chills down my spine, not because of what they meant, but because of how calm they were. It was like hearing a butcher describe a pig before the knife came down. I was there. Captain John Riker, U.S. Special Forces, assigned to security detail in Geneva during what was supposed to be a diplomatic sit-down. We didn't bring weapons. That was the order. They wanted to show trust. But trust is something humans built for other humans, not monsters forged in solar storms. The first shot didn't come from us. It came from a rookie Aurak, twitchy, maybe bored. He vaporized a delegate from Brazil for speaking without permission. We all froze. The bastard didn't even flinch. He just turned back to his superior, waiting for approval like a child showing off a finger painting. "And you know what that commander did?" He laughed. Laughed. That was the moment something broke inside me, inside all of us. They weren't just strong. They enjoyed it, enjoyed being feared. By the end of that week, they'd established centers of correction in major cities, places where humans were taken for re-education. Anyone resisting disappeared. Whole families vanished from suburbs overnight. Drones patrolled the skies, and all the world's armies were told to stand down or face cleansing. But humanity, we're not bred for obedience, not forever. I found myself underground with people I'd once considered enemies. Chinese intelligence, Russian ex-military, South American guerrilla fighters, working side by side in a network we called the Ember. Because when all the fires go out, it's the embers that still burn. What the Aurak Val didn't understand was that strength wasn't just about muscle or war. It was about pain. About what you're willing to lose and still keep fighting. And in the dark corners of that resistance, something was being built. Not a weapon, a plan, a trap, one that would exploit the very thing they were too arrogant to guard. Their pride. We didn't have the numbers. We didn't have the weapons. Hell, half of our governments were still pretending peace was an option. But we had one thing the Aurak Val couldn't wrap their thick skulls around. We had the ability to adapt through chaos. The Ember started small, stolen comms, smuggled food, hiding survivors. But it didn't take long for blood to be spilled. The first Aurak we killed wasn't even part of the plan. He was just in the wrong alley at the wrong time. A kid named Thomas, barely 17, ran into him by accident during a supply run. The Aurak turned, raised that same arrogant hand they all did before they wiped you from the face of the earth. And Thomas snapped. He shoved a rusted pipe through the Aurak's throat. Everyone expected the Aurak to shake it off, rip the boy in half, and keep walking. But it didn't. It bled. Thomas died 10 seconds later, crushed against the wall like a paper bag. But that one moment changed everything. We realized they weren't gods. They could bleed, and anything that bleeds can be killed. From that moment, the resistance stopped surviving and started hunting. There was no broadcast, no big speech, no military salute. Just a whisper passed from bunker to bunker. They can die. Make them die. We didn't have fancy weapons, so we built dirty ones. Homemade EMPs, chemical traps, electromagnetic pulses fried from repurposed microwave ovens, anything that could screw with their systems, slow their reaction time, or give us a sliver of a chance. And then there was the drug. We called it ASH. It started as a failed cancer treatment, supposed to increase neural response time. On humans, it just made people jittery. On Aurak Val, it overloaded their bio-armor, short-circuited their implants, and turned them into twitching statues. We didn't know why it worked at first. Some scientists in a sewer lab figured out their tech ran on a type of bioelectric field. ASH scrambled that signal. If we could get close enough to inject them, they were done. And so a new kind of soldier was born. The injectors, men and women trained not to shoot from a distance, but to charge. Face to face, blade in one hand, ASH in the other. Every one of them knew it was a one-way ticket. You get close, you jab the ASH into their neck, and you pray your buddies are there to clean up what's left after the Aurak Val starts convulsing. I trained 20 of them personally. I watched 19 die. The one that lived, he became a legend in the Ember. No real name. Just a call sign. Rook. He didn't talk much. Scar across his cheek, never blinked, and he could throw a blade through a crack in a wall at 20 feet. His ASH count? 14 confirmed kills. All Aurak, all up close, all brutal. He didn't fight like a soldier. He fought like a man who'd already died inside. There was something poetic about it, really. These towering warlords who ruled solar systems were falling to a species they'd written off as weak, emotional, primitive. And maybe we were. But that's what made us dangerous. We didn't play by their rules. We never had. While the Aurak focused on wiping out organized armies, the Ember grew in the cracks. We hacked their drones, hijacked their transport lines, stole their food, poisoned their commanders. Every time they crushed a city, 10 more resistance hubs sparked in the ruins. And still they didn't change tactics. That's the thing about the strong. They think they're invincible until they're not. The breaking point came in Casablanca. Aurak Command had set up a main processing center there. They were converting it into a hybrid city, their version of integration. Humans were being used to build it. Aurak oversight everywhere. Surveillance, patrols, scanners, the works. We couldn't get near it, not without suicide. So we turned to the one thing even they couldn't stop. Disease. Not a virus. A lie. We leaked a fake communication. Said a hybrid human strain of infection had broken containment in the Casablanca facility. Said it was airborne. Said it spread fast, and the only way to cleanse it was to incinerate everything within a 20-mile radius. We made it look like the message came from Aurak High Command. They believed it. 2 days later, they burned their own city to the ground. Thousands of their own. Gone. And in the ashes, we walked in and took everything that was left. Armor, weapons, tech, files. That's when we found out something that made my stomach twist. The Aurak weren't the only species they'd dominated. They were just the latest in a long line of butchers in the galaxy. 10,000 years of genocide, enslavement, and corrections. They didn't see us as a threat because no species ever had been. Until us. But this wasn't going to be about survival anymore. We were going to become their extinction event. So we planned something different. Not sabotage, not a skirmish. A message. We picked Leningrad Prime, one of their floating citadels hovering over what used to be Eastern Europe. It was their symbol of victory. 3,000 Orak soldiers lived there. The largest weapons depot in this quadrant. Impenetrable. That's what they believed. But the problem with building monuments to your own power is this. You make them too heavy to notice the cracks underneath. We got inside through the waste shafts. 12 of us. Me, Rook, and 10 ash injectors. No guns, no backup. Just blades, masks, and bags full of explosives. It took us 3 days to reach the central core. By then, 2 were dead. 1 suffocated in a flooded shaft, another caught by patrol and executed on the spot. We didn't stop. When we reached the energy core, we didn't plant bombs. That would have been too easy. We left Rook there, strapped with ash injectors, explosives, and a one-way transmitter. He was going to stay behind, wait for the Orak to discover him, and when they tried to interrogate him, when they thought they had him trapped, he'd blow the core from the inside. He didn't flinch when I gave the order, didn't ask for a medal, just looked at me and said, "Make sure they know my name." We got out through the same shaft we came in. 10 minutes later, the sky over Eastern Europe lit up like a second sun. Leningrad Prime was gone. Not damaged, gone. 3,000 elite Orak soldiers, vaporized. And for the first time since this war started, they paused. They hesitated. And that was all we needed. We hacked their emergency channels and broadcast one message across every occupied zone. We are not weak. We are not afraid. You are not safe. Ember lives. Humanity burns bright in the dark. The next day, resistance cells tripled. And the Orak Val finally realized what they were facing wasn't just a rebellion. It was the beginning of their end. After Leningrad Prime burned, the galaxy changed. Not immediately, not with parades or confessions. The Orak Val didn't crumble overnight, but something broke beneath their armor, something they didn't know how to repair. Fear. It wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It crept in quietly, like mold beneath steel. Suddenly, they weren't striding through our cities with smug silence. They were patrolling in squads, twitchy, overarmed, paranoid. We saw it in their eyes. Doubt. And we fed it. Every Ember cell went active. No more waiting in shadows. We attacked outposts, hijacked supply runs, and staged public executions of their officers. We left signs, human skulls marked with Ember's sigil, wired into their scanners, broadcasting one message over and over. We remember! I led Strike Cell 9, tasked with taking back the city of Johannesburg. What was left of it anyway. The Orak had turned it into a staging point, a central hub for retraining humans deemed rebellious. I'd seen the footage, men lined up in collars, children locked in what they called behavioral realignment chambers. They weren't fixing us. They were trying to unmake us. I wasn't going to let that stand. Our mission was simple. Get in, free the prisoners, kill every Orak in sight. We had 12 men, all former military. Most had lost family to the purge. One, a grizzled tank of a man named Briggs, had watched his daughter get dragged into an Orak drone transport while he was pinned under rubble. They never even looked at him, just left him crushed, watching. He wasn't fighting for freedom. He was fighting for revenge. We moved through the sewers, same route we used for extraction in Leningrad Prime. The Orak thought they'd sealed the access points. Idiots forgot humans evolved in filth. The more broken the system, the more familiar it was to us. When we emerged beneath their main facility, we split into 2 teams. Briggs and I took the south wing. Jenkins, Ramirez, and the rest moved north to plant charges and shut down the security net. We reached the lower detention level without a hitch. What we saw there made my skin crawl. Hundreds of humans, naked, malnourished, plugged into some kind of VR system. Their eyes were open, twitching, unfocused. Some were murmuring, others drooled. The Aurak were rewiring them, not with tech, with ideology, feeding them false memories, rewriting history, purging resistance. One of them looked up at me, eyes glassy, called me Instructor Ral. That was the name of an Aurak officer we'd killed last month. They'd burned that name into this poor bastard's brain. I pulled the plug myself, shut down the grid. The body twitched, seized, then went still. But the look in his eyes as he died, that tiny spark of recognition, told me he was human again for a second. That's all we could give them. A second. We freed who we could, injected those too far gone. Quiet deaths, no pain. The ones who could walk followed us. We gave them knives, no point pretending they'd get therapy later. There wasn't going to be a later unless we carved it ourselves. Briggs radioed that security had tripped. The Aurak were flooding in. We had 5 minutes. "Fall back to sub-level 3, I barked. "Set your charges. Leave nothing behind." We retreated with 30 survivors, most limping, bleeding, but alive. Then we heard the roar. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't human. It was Aurak, the raw, primal scream of a warrior caste bred for slaughter. They'd unleashed a Dreadborn. These weren't standard Aurak soldiers. They were bio-enhanced berserkers, barely contained rage housed in armor 3 inches thick. They didn't speak. They didn't feel. They existed for one reason: eradication. We'd heard rumors. No cell had survived long enough to confirm one existed. Now we were about to meet one face to face. Briggs turned to me. "I got it." "No, you don't," I said. "That's not your job." "It is now." He shoved a plasma charge into my chest and nodded. "You get them out. I'll get its attention." I didn't have time to argue. The Dreadborn hit the corridor seconds later. We heard it before we saw it. Steel-crushing concrete, a roar that turned your blood cold. Briggs turned the corner with 2 charges strapped to his chest and screamed, "Remember my girl, you metal bastards!" Then the hallway lit up. When we emerged from the ruins an hour later, Johannesburg was in flames, and not from us. The Dreadborn's internal core detonated when Briggs' charge hit. Took out 3 blocks. The Aurak reinforcements never came. They assumed it was a human bombing. They were right. But it was also a symbol. One man. One spark. One explosion. That night we broadcast a message from the ruins. "You built prisons. We turned them into graves. The ember rises." From that moment we weren't just a resistance. We were a movement. And the galaxy was watching. I didn't know it then, but human broadcasts had been leaking beyond our system. Some of the enslaved species under Aurak rule were listening. Quietly, secretly, hoping. One of them reached out. The message was garbled, laced with static and fear, but the voice was clear. "We see what you do. Teach us." The species called themselves the Draek. Insectoid, hive-minded, once warriors themselves before the Aurak shattered their queens and turned them into labor drones. They sent schematics, routes, codes, everything we needed to launch coordinated strikes in the outer colonies. And for the first time, humanity became more than a species. We became a symbol. The galaxy didn't want perfection. It wanted fire, fury, resistance. And that's what we gave them. But symbols come with a price. The Aurak Val Council declared total purge protocol. No more re-education. No more prisons. Just cleansing. every city with human habitation was marked for incineration, and their first target was New Chicago, one of the last standing free cities. 3 million lives. No Ember presence, no defenses, just time. I received the coordinates at 0200 hours. They were sending a Judicator-class vessel, massive, armored, capable of planetary-level plasma strikes, arrival in 48 hours. I stared at the report for a full minute. Then I called every Ember commander worldwide. "This is it," I said. "We hit them in the sky or we die in the dirt." We had no fleet, no air power, but we had stolen tech, and we had suicide pilots. The plan was insane. Hijack 3 Aurak dropships, load them with plasma bombs, send them up into the Judicator's flight path. One got shot down on launch. Another drifted too far east. Only the third made contact. It was piloted by a man named Carver. He was blind in one eye, 72 years old. Used to be a janitor at NASA. He radioed in as he locked course. "They called us monkeys once," he laughed. "Guess this monkey learned how to fly." Then he vanished into the sky. The Judicator never made it to Earth. It cracked in half above the Pacific and rained fire into the ocean for 3 hours. 3 million lived. And the Aurakval? They lost their weapon of last resort. That was the first time I allowed myself to believe we might actually win. Not because we were stronger, but because we were human. And that was enough. We thought Earth would be the battleground. We were wrong. It became the rally point. The Aurakval didn't just fear what we were doing on Earth. They feared what we'd become. Something unmanageable. Something uncontainable. Something viral. The minute we took down the Judicator-class ship, things changed. Not just on our planet. Across the systems they ruled with iron fists and scorched moons. Other species began broadcasting encrypted signals, praying someone was out there. And someone was. United States. The Dryak Hive was the first to act. Under the Aurak's rule, they'd been lobotomized into obedience, fed drugged pollen, forced to work in mining colonies beneath the volcanic belts of Kator 9. They hadn't seen free sky in over a generation. But after our message reached them, one of their engineers, just one, rewired a coolant system into an explosive device. Blew open an entire underground complex. 3,000 drones escaped. That's how it started. Then the Ynnari spoke out. Pale-skinned humanoids, eyes glowing like coals, their whole culture based on silence and service. The Aurak had stolen their voices with neural implants, but the Ember's message was visual. Fire, action, revolution. They didn't need words. They hacked their own suppression systems, unleashed their psionic power for the first time in centuries. 2 Aurak battalions were turned into meat sculptures before they even drew a weapon. Then came the Grolax, huge, slow-moving beasts with skin like granite. The Aurak used them as mobile shields. We used them as living battering rams. They defected in waves, crushing their Aurak commanders beneath feet the size of Earth trucks. They didn't speak, didn't plan. They just saw the tide turning and chose the winning side. One by one, system by system, sparks flew, and Ember grew into something bigger. We called it the Ash Concordat, a coalition of species bound not by diplomacy, but by shared hatred, by shared scars. But there was a problem. We were winning hearts, not wars. The Aurakval still had fleets, armies, superweapons, and we were stretched thin, bleeding fighters faster than we could recruit them. We needed something big, not just a message, a strike. We turned our eyes toward Veilcor, the Aurak homeworld. No one had touched it in 10,000 years. It was surrounded by asteroid defenses, cloaked mines, warp jammers. But deep in our resistance network, we had a mole, a nameless source. No voice, just text relays through a Draek translator. They called themselves Carnius, and they gave us everything. The codes, the weak points, the rotation patterns of their planetary shields. Carnius wasn't just some rebel. He was high in their ranks. Too high. I didn't trust him, but we didn't have time to second guess. We built Operation Pyre, a three-front assault meant to punch a hole through their outer defenses and deliver one thing: Rook's Blade. The weapon was forged from recovered Aurak tech, bonded with a human neurocore and powered by the Ash Serum. It was designed for one purpose: to cut through their command center and collapse their neural grid, the network linking their officers in real time across the galaxy. We didn't have a fleet, so we built a Trojan horse, a Draek mining vessel, gutted and rebuilt with stealth plating, carrying 12 soldiers, one psionic bomb, and the blade. I led them personally. We called it the Ember Fang. We left orbit in silence. No send-off. No banners. Only silence. Because if we failed, there wouldn't be anything left to come back to. The trip took 5 days. Every hour, one of the crew died. Radiation leaks, infections, malfunctions. We patched wounds with gauze soaked in coolant and prayers whispered to gods we didn't believe in anymore. By the time we reached Veilcor's orbit, only 5 of us remained. And their sky was already burning. The Concordat had launched distraction raids across the system, Grolax slamming into orbital platforms, Yanari blinking through shadows, carving flesh from bone, the Draek detonating suicide bombs in their mineral silos. All to buy us one shot. We used it. Dropped from orbit in an old escape pod wrapped in a cloaking field, crashed 3 miles from their grand citadel, the heart of their command nexus. Everything we saw along the way burned into my mind. Piles of alien corpses, monuments made of bones, children wired into databanks. This wasn't a civilization. It was a machine of conquest, fueled by pain. We didn't stop, didn't rest, didn't breathe. We reached the Citadel gates in 6 hours, fought through 10 patrols, and lost 3 men in the process. That left 2 of us, me, and a woman named Kryll. Yennery rogue, eyes like fire, scars like topography maps. She'd lost her entire bloodline to an Aurak cleansing in the Varnish Nebula. She didn't fight for honor. She fought for erasure. We stormed the command floor, 30 Aurak officers, 20 seconds of fire. Then silence. The neural grid was right there, pulsing, humming, alive. We planted the blade, but the system fought back. Carnius's codes failed. The firewall was alive, eye-based, pulsing, aware. Kryll stepped forward, dropped her weapon, and whispered something in her language I didn't understand. Then she grabbed the neural core with bare hands and pushed. Psionic feedback fried the entire room. She collapsed, bleeding from her eyes. But the firewall? Gone. I drove the blade in, and the grid shattered. Across the galaxy, Aurak command units went dark. Orders stopped. Coordination failed. Entire fleets drifted aimlessly. We didn't win with fire. We won by cutting the head off the beast. That night, the Ash Concordat declared victory, but I didn't feel it. I sat by Kale's side as her breath slowed, her body twitching in the aftermath of the overload. She smiled and said, "Now they can suffer like we did." Then she was gone. We returned to Earth 2 weeks later. Not as saviors, not as heroes, just survivors. The Aurak Val weren't extinct, not yet. But they were fractured, leaderless, hunted. For the first time in history, they were the prey, and we were the apex predators. The galaxy had shifted. and it would never forget the day the strongest species met humanity, and history took a turn. Victory was a funny thing. We expected fireworks, celebrations, unified cheers rising from a dozen liberated species. But what we got was silence. Dead silence, the kind that creeps into the bones after the last scream fades and there's no more blood left to spill. The Orakval didn't die overnight. They splintered. Without the neural grid, without command cohesion, their empire collapsed in pieces. Whole units went rogue. Some tried to bargain, trading coordinates for amnesty. Others turned to piracy, brutalizing fringe worlds out of pure instinct. And a few just vanished, disappeared into deep space. We didn't chase them, not yet. We had too much to clean up. Whole planets needed rebuilding. Supply chains had to be restored. Prison colonies required liberation, medical aid, governance. It was chaos, the kind of chaos that power-hungry men crawl out of their holes to feed on. And that's when the real war started. Not against the Orak, against ourselves. The Ash Concordat was never designed to rule. It was a coalition of vengeance, not vision. Every species wanted something different. The Yanari pushed for silence-based psionic governance, a council of thought-sharers that humans couldn't even communicate with. The Dra'ek wanted hive dominance restored, entire planets ruled by queen mothers bred in secrecy. The Grolax didn't care who ruled, as long as they had food and somewhere to stomp. And then there was humanity. United States. We were scattered, traumatized, drunk on survival. Ember had grown so fast, so far, it didn't know how to lead. It only knew how to burn. And I was still being called a general, still being asked for orders. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours in weeks. My hands still shook from what I'd seen on Veilcore, from what Kale had sacrificed. And yet here I was, sitting at a conference table floating in orbit over what used to be the Orak capital, now a smoldering crater with smoke still curling into the vacuum. Everyone wanted something from me. Land, votes, control, but I only wanted one thing: to bury the war. I tried to broker peace, suggested shared councils, intermediary governments, rotational leadership, anything to stop the next war before it started. But no one listened. Because peace doesn't make men powerful, war does. And someone else had noticed that too. We started picking up ghost signals 2 weeks after the Concordat's summit fell apart. Encrypted frequencies, Orak-coded but distorted. Not full transmissions, more like pings. Testing, searching, recon. I should have ignored it. Should have focused on Earth, on rebuilding Ember into something functional. But I didn't. I followed the signal, and what I found made my blood run colder than anything I'd seen in battle. The coordinates led to an abandoned Orak facility on the edge of the Entari Rift, a gravity well so unstable even the Orak rarely sent ships through it. We took a small team. Just me, 2 human techs, and 1 Dra'ek whisperer named Solka. What we found wasn't a base. It was a vault, dozens of cryo-chambers lined in rows, untouched by time, each labeled with markings we'd never seen before. Not Orak military designations, not species identifiers. Something older, something ancient. Solka translated the glyphs. His voice trembled as he read them. The first flesh. The Orak weren't the first apex species. They were bred by something else, something smarter. We found one chamber open. Empty. A corpse lay nearby, not Orak. Bigger. Pale. Elongated limbs. Needle-thin bones. Skin like stretched wax. And in its hand, a device. Half organic. Pulsing softly. It activated when we touched it. Broadcast a signal in a frequency so deep it made our teeth ache. We tried to jam it. Failed. By the time we got back to the ship, something had already responded. Not from this galaxy, from outside it. A new threat, older, patient, and very, very awake. I returned to Earth with the corpse and the signal log, laid it all out for the Concordat. But no one listened. They were too busy carving up territory. So I made a choice. I reactivated Ember, not as a resistance, not as a government, as a barrier. Our job wasn't over. The war against the Aurak was just the beginning. Because the real architects of power, the ones who created the Aurak, they were coming. And they weren't interested in conquest. They were coming back to finish their experiment. And this time it wasn't about domination, it was about extinction. Other Ember cells, even old Aurak defectors, confirmed the pings were increasing. Deep frequency messages, sent from regions beyond the mapped stars. We knew their location, but no ship dared breach the edge of that void. They called it the Crown Expanse, a dead zone. No light, no data, no return. But now, things were coming out of it. We saw them first through a Draic observatory drone near the Ceres fringe. The footage was corrupted, blurry, interlaced with static, but one frame came through clean. A ship, but not a ship. It didn't move like Aurak vessels. No heat trail, no propulsion. It drifted, glided, its form constantly shifting, metal folding like liquid skin, then snapping into jagged crystal shapes before disappearing again. Size? Impossible to measure. Weapons? Unknown. But the bodies they found near it, 12 patrol drones, vaporized. One human reconnaissance vessel, sliced in half at the atomic level. No signs of energy weapons, no known tech residue, just precision, like something dissecting a lab rat. The Council still denied it, called it sensor error, panic bait. But we knew. The thing in that footage wasn't a probe. It was a scout. And where there are scouts, there's a fleet. I pulled together my old strike team, the few who were still breathing. Ramirez, now in charge of planetary defense logistics. Toma, once a comms tech, now hardened into a drone warfare expert. And Zen, a Grolax berserker who'd followed me since the Aurak siege on Johannesburg. Loyal as a dog. Meaner than a plague. We didn't wait for the Council. We launched a covert survey vessel, the Night Spiral. No weapons, all stealth. Our goal? Breach the Crown Expanse. See what was really out there. Get the truth, or die proving it existed. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. There was no one left to care. The voyage out took 7 days. 7 days of static, sleepless paranoia, and drifting through a void that felt more like a tomb than a frontier. When we crossed the Expanse's boundary, everything changed. Stars vanished, literally gone. No starlight, no radiation, just black. Our ship instruments failed, grav readouts flickered, time warped, clocks unsynced, even internal implants began misfiring. Ramirez started hearing whispers through the ship's intercom. Toma saw lights moving outside the ship's hull. Zen said nothing, just sharpened his blades over and over, like he knew it was already too late. And then we saw it. The Arc Spire. Not a fleet, not a vessel, a construct, big enough to cast shadows across planets, shaped like a spiral tower, twisting into itself over and over, stretching between dimensions like it couldn't decide which plane it wanted to exist in. It didn't react to us. Not at first. Then our ship systems locked. Life support froze. A low hum filled the air, like a choir of dying stars whispering in reverse. That's when we saw them. Not Aurak. Not even biological. They looked like they were wearing bodies. Borrowed them. Mismatched limbs, hollow sockets where eyes should have been, organs exposed but not bleeding. Like death stitched together by something that didn't understand how flesh worked. Ramirez vomited blood. Toma collapsed, eyes flickering like a broken screen. And Zen, that bastard, stood up and charged the airlock with both blades. The door opened for him. Just opened. And he walked into the black. I never saw him again. Then I heard it, not with ears, with mind. A voice. It didn't speak in words. It projected emotion, memory, agony. It showed me Earth burning, humanity kneeling. Not to the Aurak, but to something older. It showed me the truth. The Aurak were their children, their foot soldiers, genetically engineered to rule, conquer, suppress. And when the Aurak failed, when they fell to humanity, the architects decided it was time to clean the board. We were the infection, a species that broke the cycle. And now they were coming. I don't remember how I got back. Our ship was drifting near Mars orbit 2 weeks later, communications down, emergency beacon running. I was the only one left. Toma's body was found with his spine crystallized. Ramirez, nothing but a smear of organic ash. They didn't kill me. They let me live. Because now I was their messenger. Back on Earth, I gave my report. They locked me in a containment chamber for 5 days, tried to scan my mind, interrogate me, drug me. Didn't matter. They saw it, too. The footage. The arc spire, the enemy that had been sleeping behind the curtain of stars. And now, they were coming. I warned them. Forget peace, I said. Forget rebuilding. You think the Aurak were monsters? I leaned in. You haven't seen God bleed yet. The architects didn't arrive with sirens or fire. They came like a rumor, a chill, a silence that no one could explain. Earth's orbit had been quiet for weeks. No Aurak remnants, no concordate fleets, just the routine hum of supply drones and false security. Then a moon blinked out. Not exploded, not vaporized. Gone. The Draek colony on Lunares 4 sent its last signal at 0400 hours Earth time. A distress call filled with overlapping screams, scrambled video feeds, and a single repeating word from a voice not its own. Correction. By dawn, 6 colonies were offline, and Earth still did nothing. The Council was fractured. Every species was pulling resources back to its own system. Treaties were evaporating. The Ash Concordate was a name now, not a government. No one could agree on who had jurisdiction, who had authority, who had the guts to lead. So they turned to me. Again. General John Riker, the war criminal, the resistance symbol, the last living bastard who kept surviving. I didn't want the title, didn't ask for it. But someone had to stop the bleeding. We formed a new war council in the old Ember Citadel. This time, no flags, no pledges, just survivors, fighters, species with nothing left to lose. I had one goal: build a wall around Earth. Not metaphorically, physically. We called it the Bastion Protocol. Layered defense grids, orbital plasma traps, magnetic shields powered by every planet in the inner solar system. Earth would become the last bunker. Because we knew, if the architects reached Earth, it wouldn't be a battle. It'd be an extinction. The Concordate sent scraps, ships they could spare, engineers, one last Grolax battalion, even some Yanari mind-seers, pale and shaking from visions they couldn't explain. We had 12 days. That was the estimate given by Draek math threads, based on extrapolated signal patterns. 12 days before the first wave reached us. We worked like animals. Every hour counted. No sleep. No second chances. Every failure meant a crack in the armor. But no wall is perfect. And on day 5, we learned what we were really up against. A ship broke atmosphere over Antarctica. It wasn't detected. It didn't trigger our early warning systems. It descended, like mist, like smoke wrapped in logic. It didn't fire. It landed. And something walked out. Not fast, not angry, just curious. The first squad sent in didn't come back. The second? Only 2 returned. One was missing a face. The other had chewed his own tongue off and carved a message into his arm with his own bones. It is us. I went in myself, wearing experimental armor reverse-engineered from Aurak neural plating, hooked to a neuroinhibitor, a psychic barrier powered by a Yanari core. Even with all that, I could feel it. Not hate, recognition. The thing looked human. Mostly. Skin stretched too tight. Limbs slightly wrong. Its eyes shimmered, but not with color. With motion, like they were windows to something moving behind the glass. It didn't speak. Not with a mouth. It pushed a thought into me. A memory. Earth. Before war. Before fire. Me, standing at my brother's funeral. My mother crying in the cold. Then static. Then stars exploding. Then me, older, alone, floating in a ruined sky, and the voice came, "This is what we built you for." I collapsed, took 6 days to wake up. And when I did, the war had already started. The first wave came not from space, but from under. Cities around the globe reported tremors, sinkholes, entire regions vanishing into the crust. They weren't attacking with fleets. They were undoing us. Reality warped. Gravity changed in pulses. Clocks broke. Digital systems began repeating words they weren't programmed to know. People went mad, killed their families, wrote circles on walls, spoke in tones no human vocal cord could replicate. We struck back, or tried to. Orbital nukes, antimatter charges, Dryek storm clusters. Nothing slowed them. Every architect construct we hit just regrew. Like metal had memory. Like pain was just a suggestion. We learned quick. There were no weak spots, only choices. Either you fought and died, or you watched everything die slower. And the real horror? The Aurak returned. But not as enemies, as refugees. They came in broken fleets, burned, bleeding, begging. Their homeworlds had already fallen, their god complex shattered. They weren't here to conquer. They were hiding. And that's when I knew. Humanity had become the front line. The last wall. Not because we were the strongest, but because we were the only species too dumb, too angry, too damaged to run. So we stood. Me, in the Bastion Command Center, eyes burning from lack of sleep, voice hoarse from screaming commands to soldiers who'd already given more than anyone had a right to. Earth was fire, screams, ash. And still we stood. Because this wasn't just survival. This was our last defiance. I remember the final call I gave before the shields went dark. No retreat, no surrender, no forgiveness. If we die, they die with us. And then the sky cracked open. The real war had begun. The sky didn't fall. It shattered. 1 minute, the last of Earth's orbital cannons were firing blind into the black. The next, silence. Not the kind you hear, the kind you feel. The architects didn't invade like an army. They descended. As thoughts, as whispers in steel, as broken reflections of what we feared most. They took forms our minds could barely hold, some human, some Aurak, some entirely alien. Every continent reported a different shape, a different voice, a different hallucination, but all told the same story. You were never meant to win. The Bastion shield collapsed in under 3 hours. The North Tower in Denver melted without heat. Seoul inverted. City, sky, even gravity, sucked into itself like a crumpled page. In France, people reported seeing their own children leading architect forces. In Cairo, soldiers opened fire on their own shadows. We fought with everything, every missile, every blade, every ounce of venom and rage that had kept humanity alive through the Iraq War, through every genocide, through every betrayal and loss. And it wasn't enough. I was stationed in Bastion Corps, beneath the Rockies. We had the last psionic failsafe, a Yennery seer linked to a Grolax core reactor, designed to detonate not with explosives, but with thought. A mind bomb, last resort. But I wouldn't push it yet. Not while we had breath left to curse them. Zen was still alive. Somehow. Burned. Bleeding. Teeth shattered, but standing beside me like the war hadn't started, like he hadn't seen death blink at him and flinch. "Riker," he growled. "They're in the main shaft." I looked up at the red glow dripping down the tunnel walls, heard screams echo through concrete like wind through a graveyard. Then I heard my own voice screaming back. Not through speakers, through their mouths. The architects had learned our language, our pain, our faces. I stepped into the corridor, gun raised, but I didn't shoot. Not at first. The thing facing me looked like my brother, the one who died before the war ever started. His face was right, his voice perfect, but his eyes? Still, unblinking. Wrong. "You were born for obedience," it said. "You mistake suffering for strength, but your pain is predictable." And then it tilted its head, smiling like it knew how I'd die. "You were built by us, bred in chaos. Your defiance is the final flaw in our design." I pulled the trigger. 3 rounds, dead center. It didn't fall, it just changed. The skin melted, shifted, became me, then Kyle, then my mother, then nothing. Just air. Just that silence again. Zen charged down the shaft, screaming. He made it 5 steps before the light cut through him. Not a beam, a fold in space. Like the air was bent, and he fell through the crack. Gone, no scream, no trace. And then I was alone. The bastion doors behind me sealed, and I felt it. The mind bomb pulsing, the seer inside, still alive, barely, tethered to a thought no species was meant to hold. The idea that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't about winning. It was about remembering who we were. I stepped inside the chamber. The seer looked up. She wasn't Yanari anymore. She wasn't anything. But her voice still worked. "You carry it," she whispered. "The flaw, the choice, that is why they fear you." I touched the interface. It didn't ask for a code, just a memory. And in that final second, with the architects flooding Earth, with cities crumbling, oceans screaming, and stars falling out of alignment, I thought of one thing. Not war, not pain, not victory. I thought of Thomas, that boy with the rusted pipe who stabbed an Orak in an alley. The first spark, the first death, the first proof that the universe could bleed. That's what I gave the mind bomb. Not data, not hate. A boy who didn't wait to be told he mattered. The chamber lit up. The world cracked. And for a moment, I saw everything. The architect fleet, suspended mid-thought, their forms flickering, glitching, panicking, because we'd just done the one thing they didn't calculate. We made them feel. The bomb detonated, not in light or fire, but in meaning, the kind of meaning that breaks logic. Humanity, raw, flawed, illogical, free, Across the sky, their constructs froze, collapsed, fell like statues unmade by understanding. The psychic pulse spread beyond Earth. The arc spire fractured. The signal stopped. And all across the galaxy, species stopped praying and started rising. We didn't destroy the architects. We reminded them we weren't theirs. And then they left, slipped back into the black, back behind the veil, back to wherever gods go when they realize the creation doesn't worship them anymore. Earth was ruined, battered, but alive. We rebuilt slowly, no more councils, no more empires, just stories. Passed from campfire to campfire, from ruin to rebirth. Stories of Thomas, of Rook, of Kale, of the war we weren't supposed to win, and the fire we lit instead. And me? I stayed underground, watching the stars, waiting. Not for enemies, but for those who need to remember. You don't have to be the strongest species in the galaxy. You just have to be the one that says no. It's been 30 years since the sky fell. No more battles, no more fleets, no more broadcasts screaming for war. The stars are quiet now. But Earth never forgot. I live in what used to be Colorado. The mountains survived better than most. Snow still falls, and the trees have started to return. We grow food here, real food. No more protein paste or lab-grown meat. It's hard, dirty, but it's honest. The kids who run through the snow don't know what we gave up for this. They don't recognize the names carved into the stone monuments. They don't remember the days when silence meant death, and a cracked radio signal could start a riot. Good. That means they're free. I wake up with pain in my back. My fingers don't move like they used to. But I get up anyway. I feed the chickens, I patch the fences, I keep the systems warm just in case someone finds their way here. The Concordat is gone. Ember is a whisper. Humanity doesn't rule anything beyond its own soil anymore. And we're fine with that. We spent too long fighting to learn that power means little when you're the last one left standing on a burning world. We didn't win a war, we survived one. That's all. I get visitors sometimes, journalists, historians, survivors. They all ask the same question. How did you know? I never have a good answer. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I was just too stubborn to lay down like they wanted me to. Or maybe Thomas knew the answer before any of us did. You bleed, you fight, you burn, but you don't stop. You don't bow, you never, ever bow. The last historian who came here brought an old hollow recording, repaired, cleaned up, footage of the Bastion's final broadcast. My voice, still ragged, still defiant. She asked if I wanted to hear it again. I said no, not because I regret it, because I don't need a recording to remember who we were. I carry their faces every day. Briggs, Ramirez, Kyle, Zen, Rook. They didn't die for glory. They died because no one else would. And that's the truth I keep buried in this quiet little patch of earth. We weren't the chosen ones. We weren't heroes. We were the infection that turned into a cure. The galaxy still watches us. From afar, species that once ruled now live in peace, quietly rebuilding. The Dryak have their sky hives again. The Yeneri have retreated into mind space, rebuilding thought cities in silence. Even the Orakt, those few who chose not to die with their empire, live among us, not feared, not followed, just there, trying to understand how the species they tried to correct ended up rewriting the script. We don't hold grudges, but we don't forget either. Every year, on Ash Day, we light fires, not to mourn, to remember. There's a boy in the village, quiet, always fixing things. The others tease him, call him strange. He reminds me of Thomas, the spark behind the eyes, the anger that hasn't found its shape yet. I keep an eye on him, because history doesn't need to repeat, but it does need a witness. One day someone will come again. Maybe not the architects, maybe not an empire, But someone, something, always comes. And when they do, we'll be ready. Not with fleets, not with bombs, with memory, with will, with the same flaw that turned us from prey into predators. Choice. I sit on my porch every evening, watching the stars blink into place, and I smile, because no matter what comes next, we already proved the point. We were supposed to kneel. We stood. That was enough. That will always be enough.